it's fantastic to be here. I just wanted to say that thanks to Alison for a fantastic talk. I actually got goosebumps when she was telling the story about Mind the Gap. It was wonderful. I'm a little nervous about the fact that my talk does focus on bridges rather a lot in a slightly negative way, and obviously the day is all about bridges. I'd like to say first of all that there are some fantastic research projects that I have witnessed and that can happen. And what Alison pointed to as well is incredibly important. And what I'm focusing on today is when it can be challenging and what can go wrong. So please do bear with me and realise I do think that research is incredibly important and can go very well. So my talk is Falling Through the Gaps, or a Game of Snakes and Ladders. And right from the start, I'm sort of demonstrating the difficulty of taking theory into practice. The first time I ran through my talk, I decided I didn't like the title. So I've changed it. And it's actually Falling Through the Gaps, the map is not the territory. So this is what happens when you're doing research, bringing theory into practice. Often when you get there, things are very different on the ground. I'm Alexandra McCauley. I run a nursing home in the Highlands, and it's actually, I think, one of the most remote nursing homes in Scotland, actually. It's right on the west coast of the Highlands. That has its challenges too for doing research. I've mentioned my qualifications at the bottom purely to mention that I have nearly have a PhD. A lot of the speakers today do have them, but that is my own experience of trying to do research and really not getting there. I was doing it for 7 years and failed to get it at the end. So I have quite a lot of personal experience with the difficulties of bringing theory into practice. So you've actually seen the picture already now, but if you look at the conference poster here, I wonder how many people actually looked closely at the bridge in the background on the conference poster. It's an interesting choice of bridge when we're talking about bridging this gap. So the bridge they've chosen here is a very high sort of foot suspension bridge. And building bridges can be challenging, as can crossing them. So if you think about this kind of bridge is wobbly, yet very high flying. So if you fall, there's a long way to fall. It's nerve-wracking. People have to move one at a time. It's very unstable footing. It's single track, one-way traffic, slow moving, very exposed to the elements, and very easily buffeted by external forces. It lacks proper infrastructure and lacks resources. And I actually think that's probably quite an apt bridge to choose for some research projects. It can be very challenging. However, they may have chosen other types of bridge. So as another example, I call this the Blingy Bridge. This is actually the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Some of us may have been involved in projects like this. These projects are very different. They have a lot of infrastructure and resources. They involve a lot of prior planning. They have an issue with the volume. That's fine. They create great marketing, so they look very blingy and very shiny. So it's great on your website. It looks like you're doing a great project. They're designed to move quickly and go very smoothly. The monkeys like them. Everyone can get on board. They take a lot of traffic, but they also take a lot of upkeep. So if you have been lucky enough to be involved in one of those, or unlucky enough, let's wait to see. The next bridge I'm going to illustrate is what I call, and please don't take offense, the virtue signalling bridge. Now, this I think happens a lot, unfortunately, in research. I may mention it a few times in the talk, but in my experience, there's a lot of signalling and less doing or embedding sometimes when we're talking about carrying out research in the care sector. So things start, but nothing much really happens. I won't read through the whole thing, but just as an idea, bespoke and charming footbridges, friendly, welcoming, inclusive, good, honest structure, down to earth, humble proportions, don't require great resources. They appear more realistic. But unfortunately, in all these cases, I've witnessed a failure to actually make any progress. So just very quickly a bit about me. I tried to bridge this gap myself as a sort of one-woman bridge. I started on the academic side, so at Edinburgh University doing cognitive psychology and the, as you know, 7-year PhD that came to nothing. I then moved into research projects with Edinburgh University and the care sector. So I was on a project called Connecting Care. It was a 3-year project funded by NHS Education for Scotland, Quality Improvement Scotland, and with Care Inspectorate support as well. And the challenge about that is that we did really start to get somewhere, but the funding ended 3 years into the project, just when we started to get somewhere, and really nothing much took hold. we focus very much on encouraging care staff to speak out, to talk, to have these conversations. Our resource was actually called Let's Talk About It. I then, later on, decided, had a great idea to bring this theory into practice by running my own nursing home. So I'm now a care home provider. What I planned to do was to bring theory into practice in my own home, and the bridge I imagined was the one in the picture. It's idyllic oil painting with lily pads, calm, happy, and wonderful. Not quite what I experienced when I got there. So in practice, what I actually do is, as I said here, everything. A lot of meetings and panic, quite a lot about the future of the care sector. That's my day-to-day life. And also, having spoken to a lot of care staff when I was doing the work with Connecting Care, I now try not to imagine what they say about me as a provider, because I know what people say about providers. So, defining this gap that we're trying to bridge. As I said, I started on the theory side, and we encourage staff to sort of open cans of worms and talk about everything. Let's talk about it. Just an anecdote I have from when I first became a provider. I went into my nursing home and met with the manager for the first time. And I very excitedly handed her the resource that we created called Let's Talk About It. And I created the CD-ROM in those days, the DVD, single-handedly myself. So I handed this to her, explained what it was all about, was very pleased to show her that I understood what was going on in the home. And I went away, and I came back later and was pleased to see that the CD-ROM was out of the booklet and on the side of her laptop. And I went to ask her, what did she think about the resources, just as she put her cup of tea down. And I realised she was using it as a coaster for her cup of tea. She hadn't watched it at all. And I'm not in any way criticising my manager, because on that day, that was indeed the best use for the DVD. It was a difficult day. And I was, in a way, sort of presenting this to her without knowing the territory. I was giving her a map and telling her I knew what I was doing, but actually I didn't. So the problem with bridges, I'm afraid, I'm sorry about to hammer on about bridges, is that we build bridges, but just the idea of building them implies we're on opposing sides. There's a them and an us. It's a bit of an oppositional sort of framework, so A and B. I was presenting my manager with the resource without really getting to know her first. We then have the idea of what's very common in care homes, as I mentioned in my talk summary. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. When you're running a nursing home, a lot of things have to get put off. You do it when you get there, and if you do get there, sometimes it's not appropriate anymore. And with research, sometimes you feel you have to now do what's there because it's been presented to you, but you can't now give it your full attention. So it's a very challenging one. And it very quickly becomes a bridge too far, and then very quickly becomes time to burn all our bridges. And a lot of people give up on research because of this problem. So even with a bridge, we may make little progress. And why is that? So one thing all bridges have in common is that they ignore the terrain underneath. In fact, they're actually designed to avoid it. So we need to actually define the gap under this bridge. We need to explore the actual terrain. We need to actually be on the care home floor and understand what we're dealing with. This is where things actually happen, and it can be very different there from the ideas we have in research, or the idea even the provider has. So just as a few examples, I'll quickly scroll through some images. This is an example of a bridge where the research above is actually creating obstacles between people, and it can be very hard to get a secure footing here. This is the way I imagine my care home floor quite often, unfortunately. Who knew all this happened under bridges? So here we have, apologies, it's a metaphor. So please don't think the animals actually represent people. But we're talking about here a place where very little happens and a lot of people are very resistant to change. Another example, we have a really secure bridge that's built, but everyone's moving very quickly in a completely different direction. And so really sometimes you can find that once the bridge is built, it misses the key people, it's going against the prevailing orthodoxy in the home, it's taking people somewhere they don't actually want to go. This is another example which, again, I hope it's not too offensive to anyone, but care homes aren't always the most friendly of places to researchers. And sometimes, even the nicest home can be going through a challenging time. It can be sometimes feel quite unwelcoming or judgmental when researchers come in, but it can also be the other way around. So sometimes the care staff can feel the researchers are really judging or watching them or studying them rather than supporting them. So it can get quite frosty as a relationship. This is another example where it's very literal, everyone's left the building. So I've had experiences of this where the staff involved in the project leave and we lose all the knowledge with it. Or, to be very literal, we also had experience where we had building works going on, which completely interfered with the running of the project. It's a very mundane example, but it can really affect running a research project. Nothing's moving here. We've got too many projects going all at once. Everyone's jammed into this bridge, so nothing really is going to be able to happen. Everyone's here getting swept away, going with the flow, just trying to stay afloat. This is obvious. This is obvious. I've experienced this a lot in my home staffing shortage. And this is an interesting one where no one actually has any idea that anything is actually going on. So the manager may not have told anyone there's even a research project happening. Can I just check, do I have another couple of minutes because of the other?
Yes.
I'm bringing Alison back in at the end, so I've taken her a couple of minutes. And finally, we forget to build the bridge at all. So the map is not the territory. We need to ask some questions about why we're actually building this bridge. What are we building it for? Where are we going? Who's actually going to be involved in this? I then have slides I'm not reading, but just to illustrate the challenges, and I can send these slides to anyone that's interested. Challenges for the care home, there are a lot. Challenges for the researchers, there are a lot. And challenges with government priorities and funding. And the only point I'd like to make about these slides is that very often there can be something I would like to call a false positive feedback, which is where everyone has a real incentive to present the research as if it's been successful. Right from the government, the funding bodies, the researchers, and even the homes and the care staff, because we're trying to get secure funding for the next year, keep things going, to look good, sometimes to virtue signal, sometimes to tick a box, or to meet our targets. And this can be a very dangerous thing to happen. So, falling through the gaps, in summary, it's to not notice or deal with something, to be overlooked, missed, or neglected. There are a lot of gaps on the ground on the care home floor, but if we build a bridge, and the bridge isn't built successfully, we have a really long way to fall as well. It could be even worse. So really the point of my talk, I've used the snakes and ladders, but I'm sticking with maps as a territory, is that we really need to get a secure footing before we start. So we need to have a good grounding. We need to make sure we understand the actual terrain of the care home. We need to make sure that we're involving everybody. We need to make sure that we understand that there are pitfalls, and it takes time to climb back up the ladder one rung at a time. It can take time and you end up back at the start sometimes. But if you persist, it can be really worth it. So building a bridge to get them more quickly or to avoid the pitfalls can really prevent any real progress from happening. So solutions, I leave that over to you. I mentioned a research project they were doing with someone called Laura Graham, who's here somewhere, with the University of Highlands and Islands, which I'm very excited about. So I do have a lot of hope for research, but I'll leave the solutions over to you. And then back to Alison. A bit more interactive. Thank you.
The thing to stress is that me and Alexandra only met each other on Teams before this moment in this day. And as soon as we met each other, we were like, oh yes, like you get it. And I know there are some other providers in the room who also get it when you find those people who are on the same journey as you are. And one of the things we spoke about at the time was really thinking about what has become less important. And we wanted to ask that question of the room today. So what has recently become less important to you as somewhere to start from? So maybe you want to discuss that with your colleagues. What has become less important to you?